What are the beginner woodworking tips I wish somebody had sat me down and told me on day one, before I wasted years and a pile of good lumber, learning them the hard way? There are 25 of them, and most cost you nothing but a change in how you work, and a few of them will keep you out of the emergency room. I have run a garage shop for more than 25 years, and I made just about every mistake on this list at least once, some of them a dozen times. These tips run from how you plan a cut, to how you keep all 10 fingers, to how you get a finish that looks like you knew what you were doing. Stay with me to the end, because the last real trick I am going to show you lifts a dent clean out of a board like it was never there, and it feels like magic the first time you watch it happen. And somewhere in the middle is the one habit that shows you exactly how your finished piece will look before you open a single can of finish, so you can fix every flaw while you still can. Start with the planning, because most bad cuts are decided before the saw is even running. Tip 1. Write a cut list before you cut anything. Sit down and plan every part of your project and its final size on paper first, so you are never standing there doing math with a spinning blade in your hand. Almost every wrong cut I have ever made came from figuring it out on the fly instead of working from a list. I once built a whole cabinet carcass an inch too shallow because I was holding the numbers in my head instead of on paper, and I did not catch it until the shelves would not fit. An index card and a pencil would have saved me a weekend. Tip 2. Cut on the waist side of your line and leave the line. A pencil line has real width, and if you saw right down the middle of it, you have already lost half its thickness off your part. A regular pencil line is maybe 1/100th of an inch wide, about the thickness of the edge of a business card, and that is enough to throw a tight joint. Cut just to the waist side and sneak up on it, and your piece lands exactly on size. Tip 3, and this one gets everybody. Account for the saw kerf. The kerf is just the width of the slot the blade cuts, and a normal blade turns about 1/8 of an inch of wood into dust on every single pass, about the thickness of 2 stacked nickels. Lay out 3 parts on one board, without leaving room for that kerf between them, and your third part comes up short every time. Tip 4 moves to the wood itself, and it is the foundation of every clean cut. Joint one straight edge before you rip a board to width. Ripping just means cutting a board the long way, down its length. Your board needs one true, dead straight edge to ride against the saw fence. The metal guide the wood slides along. If you push a bowed, curved edge against that fence, the saw just copies the curve onto your fresh cut, and now you have 2 bad edges instead of 1. Get one edge straight first, on a jointer or with a straight edge and a router or a circular saw, and everything after it comes out true. Now we get into the part that matters more than any tip on how to make a pretty cut, which is how to keep your hands, because this is a table saw section, and the table saw is the tool most likely to hurt you. The Consumer Product Safety Commission estimates tens of thousands of table saw injuries treated in American emergency rooms every year, and most of them trace back to 2 or 3 setup mistakes we are about to cover. If you do not own a table saw yet, file these away for the day you do, because knowing them before you turn one on is the whole point. Tip 5. Check that your saw fence is parallel to the blade. If the back end of that fence angles in even slightly toward the blade, the wood gets pinched between the fence and the spinning blade, and it burns, binds, and can come flying back at you. Set the fence dead parallel to the blade, or a hair open at the back, never closed in. Tip 6. Set your blade square to the table before you trust it. A blade tilted even 1 degree off of 90 degrees puts a slope on the edge of every board you cut, and you will not see it until your joints will not close. Check it with a real square against the blade, not the little pointer gauge on the front of the saw, because those pointers lie. I chased a gap in my box joints for a week once, blaming my technique, before I set a square against the blade, and found it was leaning about a degree off 90. The saw was wrong, not me, and 30 seconds with a square would have told me on day 1. Tip 7 is the big one, the mistake that puts people in the hospital. Never use the rip fence and the miter gauge at the same time to make a crosscut. A crosscut is a cut across the width of a board, and the miter gauge is the sliding guide you use for it. The reason you never combine them is this. If you cut a piece off using the miter gauge while the offcut is trapped against the rip fence, that little cut-off piece gets pinched between the blade and the fence with nowhere to go, and the blade grabs it and fires it back like a bullet. That is kickback. the wood violently thrown back toward you, and it is the single thing that hurts woodworkers most. Instead, clamp a small block to the fence ahead of the blade, set your length off that block, and pull the fence away before you cut, so the offcut stays free. 8 keeps that same demon in check. Leave the riving knife or the splitter on your saw. That is the curved metal fin that sits right behind the blade, and its whole job is to hold the saw kerf open as the wood passes, so the wood cannot pinch back together on the blade and get thrown. Almost everybody takes it off for some cut and never puts it back on. Leave it on. It is the cheapest kickback insurance there is, and it came with the saw for a reason. Tip 9. Stand out of the line of fire and push the wood through with a stick. Your body should never be directly behind the blade, because directly behind the blade is exactly where a kicked piece travels. Stand a little to the side, and feed the wood past the blade with a push stick. A simple stick of wood or plastic that keeps your hand a safe distance back, along with a feather board, which is a clamped guide with flexible fingers that holds the wood tight to the fence so you do not have to reach in near the blade. A push stick keeps your fingers a good foot back from the blade, about the length of your forearm, and you can make one from scrap in 5 minutes, or buy a purpose-made pusher like a GR Ripper for around $60 that straddles the blade and controls the cut completely. Your fingers are worth more than the 2 seconds a push stick costs you. We are right about at the halfway point, and the theme holding all of this together is simple. Woodworking is not about being fearless with a machine. It is about respecting the wood and the tool enough to set things up right, so the dangerous surprises never happen in the first place. The people who get hurt are almost never the careful beginners. They are the comfortable ones who stopped setting up. Tip 10 belongs to that same idea. No gloves, no loose sleeves, nothing dangling near a spinning blade or bit. This one feels backward to people, because gloves seem safer. They are not around rotating cutters. A glove or a loose cuff catches on the blade and drags your hand straight into it before you can even flinch. Roll your sleeves up, take the gloves off, tuck in any drawstrings, and pull long hair back. Bare, careful hands beat gloved, snagged ones every time here. I watched a guy at a shared shop reach toward a spinning bit with a loose glove on, and the glove tip just kissed the cutter and yanked his whole hand a couple inches before he pulled back white as a sheet. He got lucky. The glove is what almost got him, not what saved him. Tip 11, and I mean this one. Stop the second you feel tired or rushed. Nearly every bad injury in a shop happens on just one more cut at the end of a long day, when your focus is shot and you are hurrying to finish. The board will still be there tomorrow. Your fingers might not be. When you catch yourself rushing, that is the signal to shut the machine off and walk away. Take a breath here, because that was the heavy part, and it matters more than all the rest combined. You can always recut a ruined board. You cannot recut a finger. Everything from here on is about making better work, but nothing you build is worth the parts of you it takes to build it. So those safety habits are not optional extras. They are the price of admission. 12 gets us back to the wood and the craft. Learn on cheap, forgiving wood first. Pine and poplar cut clean, behave themselves, and cost almost nothing. A board for a few dollars. Make all your beginner mistakes on a $10 piece of pine, not on the walnut you saved up 3 paychecks to buy. There is no faster way to kill the joy of woodworking than ruining expensive wood before your hands know what they are doing. Tip 13. Spend your money where the tool actually touches the wood. A sharp, quality blade, router bit, or drill bit matters far more than a fancy tool body or a big brand name on the case. A good blade on a cheap saw will outcut a cheap blade on an expensive saw all day long. Put your dollars on the cutting edge, literally. I fought splintered, burned cuts for a year on a saw I thought was too cheap, then spent $50 on a good blade, and the same saw suddenly cut clean and smooth. The saw was never the problem. The dull, cheap blade that came on it was. Tip 14 saves you from a part that snaps in your hands. Run the grain along the length of narrow parts like legs and rails, and avoid what is called short grain. Grain is just the direction the wood fibers run. When the grain runs the long way down a skinny part, that part is strong. When the grain runs across a narrow piece instead of along it, so only a couple inches of fiber bridge the width, that is short grain, and it snaps right there under any load. Lay your parts out, so the grain always runs the long direction, and they hold. Tip 15. Buy your stock a little longer and thicker than the final size you need. Rough boards come with checks, which are small splits in the ends, and cup and bow you are going to machine out, and planers leave snipe, a little dip at the very ends of a board, usually the last inch or two, and maybe the depth of a dime. Start with material oversize, an inch or two long and a bit thick, about a finger's width of extra on the length, and you have room to cut all that junk away and land on a clean, perfect final part. 16 will save more glue-ups than anything else I can tell you. Rehearse the whole glue-up dry, with your clamps set to length, before a drop of glue touches the wood. Glue does not give you much open time, the window before it starts to grab, often only a few minutes. If you start spreading glue and then discover a part does not fit, or you are short a clamp, you are sunk, and the whole thing dries crooked while you panic. Do a full dress rehearsal with no glue. Work out every problem, set every clamp near to hand, and then the real glue-up is calm and slow. This is the dry fit idea I keep coming back to, and it has saved me more projects than any clamp. Tip 17. Lay a strip of blue painter's tape along both sides of a joint before you glue it. When you clamp up, the glue that squeezes out of the joint, called squeeze out, lands on the tape instead of soaking into your wood. Peel the tape away while the glue is still wet, and it takes the mess with it, leaving a clean surface with nothing to scrape. That squeezed-out glue soaked into bare wood is the thing that makes a pale blotch under your finish later, and the tape stops it cold. Tip 18. Reach for a slower setting glue when the assembly is complicated. Most yellow glue, like Titebond Original, grabs in just a few minutes. When you have a glue-up with a lot of parts that all have to come together at once, buy a glue labeled for extended open time, like Titebond Extend or Titebond 3, around $10 a bottle, and those few extra minutes are the difference between everything seated right and a rushed, crooked mess. Tip 19 is the single best finishing trick I know, and almost no beginner does it. Before you put any finish on, wipe the whole piece down with mineral spirits, which is just paint thinner. For about a minute, while it is wet, the wood looks exactly the way it will look once it has a finish on it. The color deepens, the grain pops. And in that moment it also lights up every flaw you missed. Every glue smear, every scratch, every sanding swirl, all glowing at you while there is still time to fix them. The spirits evaporate completely and change nothing, but they show you the future. I check every project this way now, and it has saved me from finishing over mistakes more times than I can count. A can of mineral spirits is about $12 and lasts years. And one caution, do this with a window open or a fan on, because the fumes are strong. If you use a water-based finish, wipe with naphtha or just a damp rag instead, since mineral spirits can fool you a little under water-based coats. Tip 20. Seal your end grain before you stain. End grain, the raw end of a board where the fibers are cut across, drinks stain like a bundle of straws and turns almost black next to the rest of the wood. Wipe a thin coat of finish or a little watered-down glue onto just the end grain first. Let it dry, and it evens out how much stain those ends drink, so they match the faces instead of going dark and blotchy. 21. Get every last speck of dust off the piece before you finish, and do it in 2 steps. Vacuum the whole thing first, then wipe it down with a tack cloth, which is a sticky cloth made to grab the fine dust a vacuum leaves behind. One tiny speck of dust or a single wood chip left on the surface becomes a permanent hard bump sticking up out of your dried finish, and there is no fixing it after. Clean it like you are prepping for surgery. And mind your conditions while the finish dries, because in a humid Gulf Coast summer, a coat can take 2 or 3 times as long to dry hard as it does in a dry heated shop in a northern winter, and dust settles onto a slow-drying finish the whole time it stays tacky, which is one more reason to clean the air and the floor before you start. Tip 22. Stir your finish, never shake it. Shaking a can of poly or varnish whips a load of tiny air bubbles into it, and every one of those bubbles dries as a little crater or pinhole in your surface. Stir it slow and gentle with a stick to mix it, and if it does get bubbly, let it sit and settle before you brush it on. Tip 23. Look at your surface under a raking light before you commit to finishing. A raking light just means a light set down low and shining almost flat across the surface, instead of straight down on it. That low angle throws a long shadow into every scratch, every dip, every sanding swirl and glue spot you simply cannot see looking straight down under normal light. Drag a lamp low across the board, mark every flaw it reveals, and fix them, because the finish will not hide them, it will magnify them. Now the trick I promised you at the start, the one that looks like magic. Tip 24. You can steam a dent right out of solid wood. When you crush a dent into a board, dropping a tool on it, clamping too hard, the wood fibers there are compressed, squashed down, but not cut. Here is the fix. Lay a damp cloth over the dent and press a hot household iron onto the cloth for a few seconds. The iron boils the water into steam. The steam drives down into those crushed fibers, and they swell back up to their original size, and the dent rises up and lifts right out of the wood, often vanishing completely. The first time you watch a dent just disappear out of a board, you will not believe it. For a stubborn dent, lay a few drops of water right on it first, and let it soak in for a minute before you hit it with the iron, and go in short bursts rather than scorching the wood. I lifted a deep clamp dent out of a walnut lid this way that I was sure had ruined the piece, watched it swell back flush in about 4 passes with the iron, and you cannot find it today. My wife thought I was ironing a board like a shirt, and asked if the shop had finally gotten to me. Then the dent vanished and she stopped laughing. One honest limit, because this only works on a dent, where the fibers are crushed but still whole. If the wood is actually torn or gouged out, if fibers are missing, steam has nothing to swell back and it will not work. A dent lifts. A gouge you still have to fill. But for the dings that happen to every project, this saves the day. And the last one is not a trick. It is the foundation everything else sits on. Tip 25. Build or buy one solid heavy workbench at the right height, and do it early. Everything in woodworking is easier on a bench that does not rack, wobble, or slide across the floor when you push on it. Set at a height where your hands fall naturally, so you are not hunched over or reaching down all day. A good rule for a hand tool height is around your wrist when you stand next to it, usually somewhere in the range of 34 to 38 inches. About hip-high on most people, though a bench you do power tool work on can sit a touch lower. A light, wobbly bench fights you on every single cut and every glue-up. A heavy, solid one at the right height disappears under the work and just lets you build. It is the real first project for a lot of woodworkers, and it pays you back every hour you spend in the shop for the rest of your life. None of these 25 is about talent, and that is the whole point. They are about planning the cut before you make it, respecting the machine so it never bites you, buying wood smart, taking your time on the glue-up, and seeing your flaws before the finish makes them permanent. Every one of them is something I learned the slow way, so you do not have to. And notice the shape of the whole list. The tips that keep you safe and the tips that make your work look professional are the same kind of thing. Small habits done before the mistake can happen, not heroics after. That is really all mastery is. A stack of small habits that head off trouble. Pick one this weekend. If you only take one, take the mineral spirits wipe, because it will show you things about your own work you have been missing for years. Next time I want to build that solid workbench start to finish, the real first project, so you have the foundation the rest of this is built on. Go make some sawdust, and keep all 10 fingers while you do it.